Okay. Welcome, everyone. We're just going to wait a couple of minutes here while we have our attendees roll in. Just some quick housekeeping while people are joining the call. Um, it's um, it's hard for us to be able to monitor the chat because oftentimes it's hard to see if we just have a comment or a question. Anytime you have a question, please do post it in the Q&A section. You can post that anytime during our talk today, and we'll definitely get to your question. And let me see, that's probably the best thing to say. So we can go ahead and get started. So today, if you are interested in knowing about how not all IT providers are created equal and the guide to choosing an IT or cybersecurity provider when your company needs to be CMMC compliant, then you are in the right place today. So today what we're going to cover, we're going to talk about certifications, training, group affiliation to look for to know that your provider is competent. We're going to talk about the questions that you need to ask your provider to ensure that they are implementing at least as much security as you are. And some of the things we're talking about today, you might be shocked about. And we're also going to talk about what's required for IT and security providers to continue to serve you. So in case you joined the call and you're not sure who I am, I'm Leia Shilobod. I'm a certified information security manager, and I'm also a certified CMMC professional, CCP. Our company, Compliance CIT, recently rebranded from Intech Solutions, so you might have also heard about us from our old name. And our organization is a registered provider organization with the Cyber AB, an RPO, which is a designation for organizations that do this kind of work. I'm also the author of two books. We did a documentary on cybercrime, and also the author of the CMMC IT Documentation Toolkit. So we help organizations to get and stay compliant with CMMC and actually onboard and implement a cybersecurity compliance program. So let's just make sure we're talking about the same thing. What exactly are MSPs and MSSPs? Well, you're actually going to find that IT managed services providers, MSPs, and MSSPs actually overlap in some of their services. So you might find MSPs providing things like help desk or network support with a network operations center. You might find infrastructure services like configuring or managing Microsoft 365, procuring servers and configuring servers, firewalls, switches, wireless, that kind of infrastructure. They also usually provide a variety of security tools like EDR and MDR, that's going to be endpoint detection and response and managed detection and response, SIM and source solutions for continuing auditing and response to those events, email security, zero trust architecture, and MFA products. There's actually a lot of different kinds of security products, and oftentimes MSPs wrap those into their services. They're also able to spec hardware for you. So if you say, hey, I need a computer, I need a server, I need a firewall, they'll talk to understand your needs, recommend the right hardware for you, and then help you to procure that. Also provide systems engineering, oftentimes vulnerability management, asset management for you to keep track of all the assets you have and when you need to do life cycling, and also some consulting services like a virtual CIO, CISO, or CISO. And the difference between those two would be a chief information security officer and a chief security officer, where your CISO is a lot more focused on just information security, and your CISO is more focused on security holistically in your organization, bringing up things, including things like personnel security and physical security. So that was a lot of different things. So how is a managed security services provider different? Oh, well, that didn't go the right way. All right. So they're focused on security services only. So you're going to see a list of security services. They do also provide managed security products like EDR, MDR, ZTA, SIMSOAR. Yes, our whole world has so many different acronyms. But they will manage those products for you. They oftentimes have most of the time they have specifically trained security personnel who are monitoring those things by way of a security 24/7 security operations center. They will also provide compliance services and consulting like vCISO and vCISO. But you'll find that um, that in that focus on security only, there's definitely a gap if you need other kinds of services to help manage your company or infrastructure. Then you ask yourself, do I need an MSP or an MSSP? Well, clearly that depends, right? So the first questions to ask yourself is what kind of internal resources do you have? And then determine the gaps in the capacity at your time and capabilities, the specialized expertise. And it's really important in this area to be okay with saying, you know what, there are some things internally that we just don't have a lot of time for. Maybe we actually, could do help desk, but we don't have time to manage all these incoming requests. Or maybe, we could do these infrastructure projects, but our people on our team right now, they're just maxed out. And so getting help on a project would really be helpful. And in capability, it's very important to be honest about that as well. Your internal team needs to be understand like where actually am I really good. I work with some organizations that they really feel like, oh, you're in IT, that means you can do anything, you can do all things. And it's amazing to me. I've worked in the industry since 2006. It's amazing in that short amount of time how we see things get more and more and more specialized. So it's really important, to not think that the person you have internally can do everything from respond to a help desk request to be responsible for, configuring a robust and complex firewall. That might not be the case, and it's okay if it's not. Most important thing is to identify really, what kind of gaps we potentially have. It's also important to assess your business risk because that's going to drive what security controls you need to have in place or what gaps you have, as well as what administrative controls, processes, policies, things of that nature that you'll need to address that risk. And then ask yourself what you want to manage internally. Um, some of the things like you can go out and you can purchase an EDR or an MDR tool yourself. But do you want to manage that? When you engage with an MSP or an MSSP, they'll manage those products and solutions for you. They manage the procurement of it for you, adding and removing licenses and all of those kinds of things. And it's possible that you might find that you need one of them or maybe both. And that's also happens frequently with the clients that we work with. Now, let's dive into choosing, which is why we're all here. MSPs and MSSPs provide a critical role to companies they support, and they are really a vital part of security and supporting the defense industrial base. Because of this, there has actually been uh, a bigger focus on MSPs and MSSPs than there were in the past, and we're going to talk a little bit about that as we move through this presentation. Compliance is coming to every industry. So I know that a lot of the companies I work with in the defense industrial base, some of them are very used to this, like having people coming in for audits or demanding to see what they're doing with their security to assure that it's compliant. And some of them are still coming along in that and are you thinking, well, this is a heavy load for us, and I get that. I'm a small business too. So it looks like it's quite, complex and a burden to the business. But we're seeing this happen in every industry where compliance is coming in different kinds of ways, but that external compliance pressure is coming to every single industry, especially for companies who are serving the defense industrial base. Those MSPs and MSSPs need to understand in detail the compliance requirements. They have to understand them. If they don't, they are not fit to serve your organization. Um, Something else that's important for you to know is that not only do they have to understand these controls really, really, really well, but they also have to implement them in their own companies. So, in the documents that were leaked last month prematurely from OIRA, in advance of the final rule being, or potentially proposed rule being announced, um, those of us that grabbed those docs and were looking at them saw that there was specific language in there about requirements for MSPs and MSSPs. And it really alluded to the fact that they would either have to get assessed against the same controls that their clients are, so my clients, or there would be a different set of controls that they would be assessed against. It was unclear about whether or not they were going to need to have some kind of formal certification, but we know that there is going to be something here. So there is going to be a requirement. And actually, I'm going to talk about this a little later. Our company, Compliance IT, joined the MSP Collective, which is the MSPs for those that are supporting critical infrastructure in our nation. And we've hired lobbyists to go to Washington and really help to educate the government, because of course you understand that if they're just going to go run with something, they're going to have their own idea about it. They don't understand private industry or really the relationship between these IT providers and the defense industrial base. And we're going to advocate for really, truly the true risk that MSPs and MSSPs have to the security of this information, to the supply chain, and assure that we are going to be required to implement controls that really address that risk. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a little while here. So remember that those providers are going to be in scope for your assessment. So if they are not implementing these controls, that means that when you go to have that assessor come in and you've paid for this very expensive assessment, if they cannot prove and show that their organization and where they are in scope, for the services they are providing, that they are not compliant, that can actually cause you to fail. And I was just at CMMC Summit on Wednesday in DC, and I was talking to some people some assessors who were doing the joint surveillance assessments. And they told me that in the middle of a joint surveillance assessment, the IT the customer was saying, the company, the OSC that was getting assessed was like, "Oh, our MSP does that." And the MSP was like, "Oh, no, no, we don't do that." And they're like, "What do you mean? That's what we pay you to do." Like, "No, no, no, no. You have to tell us what to do in that area. Like we just maintain it unless you tell us that we need to make a change." And that I can only imagine the tensions at the table in the middle of this. But that's not ever what you want to get involved in when you're sitting there during an assessment. I'm going to tell you some ways to make sure that's not you. So clearly, the selection of a provider can make your way to compliance smooth, or it can end up costing you hundreds of thousands of dollars, and at the very least, being incredibly frustrating. So first, let's talk about determining that selection criteria. What should you be thinking about and looking about, or making a list of when you're selecting a provider? You want to look at credentials, certifications, organizational membership. Responsiveness is obviously important. Collaboration, willingness to understand the needs and what that looks like. And then, of course, social proof. Like we all say that we're awesome, right? Everyone's like, yeah, I'm awesome. I provide awesome services. But you want to see the social proof of other companies and that are saying the same thing. What are they saying about this organization? You also want to make sure that you have a list of internal controls, securities, policies, plans, procedures that are going to be important that your provider has, and you're going to ask for that in the process. And then take a look at what's important for you for contract terms and exit strategy. In my industry, there is a standard for a lot of places for 3-year contracts, and a lot of MSPs try to close 3-year contracts. 1-year contracts is typically the minimum. Sometimes, depending on the services, you could get a month to month. But then, what is your exit strategy if you're going to hook yourself up with a provider? When do you determine that the relationship isn't working, and how would you determine to end that relationship? And of course, their compliance expertise. If you're on this call, then clearly the compliance expertise for NIST 100-171 and CMMC is important to you. Is there anything else that's important to you as far as clients compliance is concerned? And then there's the bleak outlook of what we are actually having happen in this industry today. And that's that most MSPs, they don't meet the NIST 100-171 requirements themselves. In fact, they are not prepared to, and they do not intend to certify for CMMC. Some MSPs actually don't even know what CMMC is or how to spell it. You have no idea how many times I go to conferences and I talk to my colleagues, and they're like, "Oh, are you doing the CMM thing, or are you doing the CMC?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that thing? Yeah. Wow." So it's very telling when you just let people talk, and they actually just show their ignorance to you. Some of them really don't even know what CUI is. They don't know why there is a CUI program. They don't know the importance of protecting CUI. They don't understand marking, digital, print, or anything of that nature. And they don't know how to help you to identify it. And one of the things when I work with companies, many of the companies I work with, their first thing that they have to figure out is, where is our CUI? How are we identifying it? How is it flowing out the organization? And they say to me, "I'm not really sure how to do that." Also, some MSPs will say, if you say, "Oh, I need CMMC compliance," they say, "Oh, well, that means you need GCC high." And they just say that without even finding out anything about you. They don't know your business process. They don't even know what kind of CUI you have. In fact, in case those of you that are here don't know, um, you don't need to be in the government cloud for Microsoft if you are not sending, receiving, or storing any CUI through email or in like SharePoint or any of their tools. If you have all of that information on-prem, or you're using an alternative secured portal, you don't need to be in the government cloud. And the only reason why you need to be in GCC High is if you have CUI there that's ITAR data or potentially no foreign data, and that's the only time it ever has to go in GCC High. So if someone ever says this to you, you can just say, "Thank you for your time," and then you can end the conversation. And many MSPs actually also don't have their own policies, plans, procedures, and the same documentation that they insist you have. I find this personally scandalous. It's one of the things about my industry that I hope we get regulation on, better standards for us as an entire industry. And one of the reasons why I really support the MSP collective and lobbying Washington for that kind of regulation on our industry. It's very strange, I'm sure, for you to hear somebody say, "Oh, yes, please, regulators, come into my industry." But if you saw what I've seen over the last 16, 17 years, at like a whole bunch of cowboys out there shooting from the hip in the freaking Wild West, you would pray for someone to come in and please make it better too. So here's some scary facts for you to think about when you're selecting that provider. The first is that you are giving the keys to your kingdom to an external provider. Many MSPs are not doing periodic risk assessments on their vendors. That's going to be things like security tools that they're recommending to you. Their RMM tool, remote monitoring and management tool, that's usually how they're remoting into their environment. That tool provides a lot of automation and is very, very, very powerful. However, it's a big risk to your organization, and they're not doing risk assessments on the suitability of those tools. The ticketing tool and the documentation tool either. That documentation tool, like where are they storing your information? They have your passwords. They have configurations about your network. They have processes. Where is that stored in a secure location? What is their process for handling and storing your passwords? And most MSPs are not doing periodic risk assessments on their own organization or considering their risk to your organization. I mean, that's all I think about all of the time. I grew up seeing everything through a security lens in this industry, and this is what I think about all the time. What is the risk of my organization to my customers? How do I decrease that risk? How do I make sure that I'm communicating that risk so we can all together make everything more secure? So now that I scared your pants off and you're like, okay, we're closing the doors, no one comes in anymore. Um, I'm going to give you guys some ideas to like there are good providers out there. There absolutely are. And here are some things for you to look for to have a better confidence that these organizations not only have your best interests at heart, but are putting time, energy, and money into securing themselves in a sufficient fashion. Look for certifications and memberships such as registered practitioner organization, or perhaps they might be a C3PAO, a CMMC third party assessor organization. These are both issued by the Cyber AB. The registered practitioner organization was intended by the Cyber AB to be the organizations that are providing the consulting to help you get ready, and the C3PAOs were intended to just be assessor organizations. But what we're finding is that some companies that were RPOs are pursuing C3PAOs because part of this process is DIBCAT coming in to do an assessment on the implementation of their NIST 800-171 controls. So actually, our organization is preparing for that right now because we do want, like the government to come in and look and test us. Also look for other memberships that they might have in the industry, like CompTIA or ASCII, that's going to be sure that they're plugged into things that are happening differently and new in our industry. Find out if they are parts of working groups, such as the MSPs for the support of critical infrastructure, which is the MSP collective I mentioned. And then there's also the CMMC Industry Standards Council, which we also sit on. The CISC, we meet weekly and we provide guidance to both the Cyber AB and also DoD from things that we are seeing. And it's made up of everyone from MSPs to assessors to licensed training providers. So the whole gamut of people are on that call. Also ask for credentials. Do they have an RP, RPA, or CCP, certified CMMC professional, or certified assessor? All of these are issued by the Cyber AB and so are surrounding this ecosystem. Also look for people who have certain security certifications from other organizations. The most common is going to be the CISM, which I am one, the CISA, which is the auditor, and then the Certified Information System Security Professional, the CISSP. So you'll see those frequently. That means that this person really cared enough to be able to learn about managing information and managing security that they wanted to attain these certifications. Also, look to see if they're implementing the 800-171 controls and CMMC internally. Are they willing to sign an attestation that they're implementing those controls? Oftentimes, you're sending this to your suppliers. Are you going to be certifying for CMMC at level 2? Well, why wouldn't you send that to your MSP or MSSP? Do they have security-related documentation? At a minimum, IT security policies, an incident response plan, a training and awareness plan. For goodness sake, what we do changes every single day. All those people have to stay trained on the new threats, on compliance continuously. In our organization, not only do we train like every single Friday, we will either have a security operations training with our entire team, or we have a compliance training. And we're also reviewing our internal processes with our team to retrain them and make sure that they are up to date and what's happening in the real world is what's happening on paper. And they also need to have a written change management process. Not only is this a requirement for 800-171, but if they don't have a written change management process, that means people in the organization could be making changes in your environment, like opening up a port on your firewall, and nobody knows about it. So everything that happens with changes always needs to be documented, and there needs to be a written process for how that happens. Um, do they have a shared responsibility matrix and understand how their services align with CMMC? So, which products and services do they are used to meet the controls? Always ask them for that SRM during the vetting process. The shared responsibility matrix, a good one, will actually have a list of every single one of the controls, all the way down to the assessment objective level. So, all 320 of those assessment objectives. And it will also say, like, okay, this is your responsibility, this is our responsibility, so that you're certain that you understand and according to the controls, who's supposed to be doing what. The one that I like to think about a lot because this is everyone can kind of see this one in their head. One of the controls talks about how you are only allowed to assure that like only authorized users may access the system. And you're like, oh, well, like our IT people have to do that. Our MSP's doing that. Well, they need to know from you who is an authorized user because they won't know that. They're not a part of your organization. So that's a shared responsibility and it should be detailed there. And if anything on there that doesn't look right, like for instance, if that just said it was the full responsibility of the MSP, then you know that they don't understand the control properly or they really didn't even think that through. And make sure that you see a copy before signing the contract. So if you engage an MSP or an MSSP for a certain kind of service, it's going to significantly change, um, what that shared responsibility matrix looks like. So asking them for an SRM upfront without having told them exactly what services you want. They could give you a sample so you had an idea, but really it's going to be during the proposal process when you're like, these are the things that I want. Okay, now can I see the shared responsibility matrix for these things that I want? And they should be able to provide it to you at that time. All right. So assure that your MSP has evidence of getting other clients compliant, that they have good partnerships, like with Microsoft or Google, that they have, I call this a tech bag of tricks, and then they probably don't call them that. I think it's just my own thing I made up, but what I call that is access to a lot of tools that will meet your needs because every business is a little different and your business process is a little different. So there's not a one size fits all solution for everyone. So, do they have a wide network, a vast variety of tools that they'll be able to give you access to for your specific company needs instead of trying to push you into products that don't fit? Make sure they are properly insured. This is huge. Ask for a type of insurance and the limits. So for cyber liability insurance, our organization carries a $2 million coverage. That should be a minimum for the organizations you're working with. Ask for testimonials or reviews. So ask them for references and ask them for written testimonials. And then, of course, there are some contractual considerations that you should be thinking about. Like, um, if you find out that they're not providing services they say that they're rendering, what does it look like to terminate the contract? especially if you're signing a 3-year agreement. And then finally, a note of caution. Um, don't ask your MSP or MSSP, just take care of all of this for me. Just take care of all this compliance for me. I have one particular client, I love him to death, but every time we show up on a call, he's like, I just need you to take care of all of this for me. Um, you can't abdicate compliance. And the way that we approach this with all of our clients, and this is actually something really important, most organizations probably don't think about it the same way that we do. But when we help an organization to implement the compliance, we don't just see this as a checklist and say, oh, did we meet all the requirements in the controls? We actually say, hey, you know what? Let's implement a cybersecurity compliance program for your organization because your business risk is more than just holding CUI and the government's information. So if you're going to do all this work and all these gyrations to do all this anyway, let's think about your business holistically and really what's important to it in that way, and as far as cybersecurity is concerned. And if you have a cybersecurity compliance program like that, that program belongs to you. So you can't abdicate that and, say, you know what, you just take care of everything and I'll just show up and, sign the papers. Like that can't be what happens. And there are also a lot of controls that you need to take full responsibility for in the shared responsibility matrix. Things like personnel security, that, onboarding, screening, offboarding, and physical security, because oftentimes your MSP doesn't even have anything to do with your physical security. And remember, you are the data custodian of the government's information, and this is a contract that you are performing on. That 7012 clause that's in your contracts, that was either like from the government if you're a prime or flowed down to you if you are a sub, that is flowed to your organization. And as a requirement in the performance of this contract. So you actually can't flow that clause down to your MSPs because in most cases they're not processing CUI, they're not storing CUI, they are not transmitting CUI. So and actually I just talked to an OSC on LinkedIn. I didn't mean to. They engaged me on a post because we were talking about MSPs and making sure that they were implementing these things. And then he started to private message me, and he's like, "Well, I'm flowing down 7012 to my MSP and in all my contracts to them." And I'm like, "Well, I don't I don't think that's a really great idea because they don't have to comply with 7012. It doesn't apply to them." And I get what you're trying to do. You want to make sure that they're coming up to a certain level, but flowing down 7012 is not the way to go. I think that if you had an attestation that they were implementing 800-171, or if they were going to get certified at CMMC, that would give you a better level of certainty and confidence that they were doing the right thing. And I think I made him a little butthurt because he replied back to me that he would never use a company like mine that felt and said those things. And I was like, okay, well, I mean, like, if you're on this call, you know how the government is incredibly legalistic. And if 7012 does not apply to the MSP and you flow it down, like maybe you feel good about it, but it's not going to help you. Um, so anyway, I'm sorry about the diatribe there. In the end, you are the risk owner in this, so you cannot wholly transfer that risk to an external organization. Absolutely. Use external providers, use external services to leverage for security, to help your business with these processes, and to help keep you compliant. But in the end, you own the risk. So, as a free gift to you for coming today, we're going to send you all a copy of our free report, The Imperative of a Shared Responsibility Matrix for Companies in the DoD Supply Chain. So if you're here today, we have your information and we'll shoot you a copy directly after the call. And that kind of gives you an idea, a little bit more detail about what a shared responsibility matrix is, why it's important, and some questions to ask. Thank you for joining us today, and wondering if there are any questions. There was a question here for what is ZTA? So ZTA is zero trust architecture, and that's basically it's a newer technology. The government has actually been talking a lot more about it in like the recent couple like the year, last couple of months. And with zero trust architecture is just that, like that you trust nothing. So it's where here's a good way to explain. So in a traditional antivirus or even these next generation antiviruses, it allows things to happen and it's looking for behavior or signatures or something like that to say, "Ooh, you're bad." Zero trust is actually the opposite. It's like we trust nothing. It's like nothing can happen on this computer. And the only way that you allow anything to happen is by specific policies that are created, usually by a human, that say that these things are allowed to run. And that's one of the reasons why it's a lot more expensive to manage, takes a lot more time to manage because you have human eyeballs on those things. But you also have a much higher confidence that things won't happen. Like for instance, we have a zero trust product on our computers and our clients use it too. It's called Threat Locker. So we have an approved software list. We uninstall everything else. We install that Threat Locker, create policies for everything, lock everything down, and then nothing else can run. So if a malicious actor tried to, like run some kind of malicious payload, it wouldn't be able to run because there's no policy for it because it's because of that zero trust architecture. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you all for joining today. It's been my pleasure, and look for that free report in your inbox. If you leave this uh, session and then you find out that you have another question, you may reach out to me directly at leia@compliancecit.io. And thank you for joining. Have a fantastic weekend.